Welcome back. Last time that we had one of these videos, we actually discussed on how to create a file and actually to save the file. So with that being said, we're going to move on to creation of a model itself. We'll be using a few commands. What I'm showing on the screen right now is an isometric view of what is considered kind of an easy model. When you first get started, it doesn't look as if it's going to be an easy task, but by the time we get through with this assignment and a few more assignments, you're going to look back and think that it's relatively easy. Isometric view is nothing more than a pictorial type drawing. We'll discuss, how it's laid out in paper space a little later on. I do have some dimensions on it that say where they're locating where the feature is, the size of the feature, the length, the width, the height, and the depth of this particular part. It also has a chamfer on the side of it. We're going to be doing this with a sketch instead of the chamfer command. We move down to our next layout, and this is orthographic projection. I don't have a title block on here or anything, but I just wanted to show you where the front view, the top view, and the right side view are going to be located in your drawings from here on out. Sometimes your drawing will have more views, sometimes they'll have less views. So if you look at this, our front view would be this face here. Top view is going to be this face, and then the right side will be this space and this oblique surface here as well. So we're going to be bouncing back and forth. I'll try not to confuse anyone with all of this, but if we want to start with basic shapes, our primary shape of this part is the front view, which gives us the best overall representation of what the part's going to be. So we've got our length of 3.5, our height of 2.5. We're going to start with just a simple rectangle, and then we'll work in the features. A lot of times when you're new to modeling, people want to get really complicated with things and try to do everything in one particular step. It doesn't make you a hero to do it in one step. It can be done, but we're more concerned about step by step and showing you how to use this particular program. So with that being said, we're going to move on to our modeling. So the last time that we spoke, we talked about how to create a part. There's a couple different ways, that we can select File and New. We can select this icon. If I hover over it long enough, it shows us the Control N, which is also new. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that. Now, what we want to do in tonight's lesson is going to be a part file. We'll work on assemblies and drawings later on. So after you have part selected, say OK. Now, if your files refresh every day, we want to make sure that you are in ANSI standard and also inch pounds per second. So make sure that you select those. So remember, over here on our left hand side, this is our feature manager tree. This tells us what we've got going on and what's been done, and kind of keeps a running history of it as well. There's a background that keeps every mouse click that you've done in a registry back behind here, so that kind of relates to your model size and everything else. Like I said, that we're really not concerned about how many steps it actually takes us to do this. We would just want to work through this thing as baby steps and one step at a time. So if you remember, we had our front view. We had our front view, and that's the one that we want to represent first. So up here, it's very Windows based. The two that we're really going to be concerned with in our tool tab is going to be the features and the sketch tool. So with that being said, I'm going to put a highlighter on it, and hopefully it'll follow us around. It does not follow me around. So we want to select an extruded boss base, and now, since our front view was the most representative of what we were trying to accomplish, we still have our three mutually perpendicular planes, and these things are named. If you hover over them, ours is going to turn orange. If I were to do one mouse click, I would actually select the front plane right now. If I hover over the top plane and select it, it's going to rotate around and would be drawing from the top. But for all intents and purposes, we want to model this the way it is on the the drafting sheet that I provided. So I'm going to come hover over the front plane till it turns orange. I want to do one mouse click and your sketch should move around normal to you. Now, when we did that, notice we went from features to sketch automatically. That's just embedded into the program itself. So this gives us all of our sketch tools that we have. In this case, I want a rectangle or a square type shape. And if I drop this chevron down beside it, it gives me the options that we have. You know, can't really tell you where you would use all of them, but over time you'll begin to recognize which one would be best for which problem that you're trying to accomplish. In this case, I'm going to use a center rectangle because I like making everything, you know, related to the origin itself, and our origin is where those three planes are mutually perpendicular, and that's going to be what the computer thinks is 0, 0, 0. So I'm going to go ahead and select center rectangle with one mouse click. It gives us the option, if we didn't want the center rectangle, if we'd be mistaken, you know, we could do a 2-point rectangle, or we could do rectangle with 3 points, center that's not located horizontally or vertically, or a parallelogram. Just depends on what you want. As I move my mouse pointer out, notice it's got the pencil with the rectangle on it. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to hover over the point of origin, and notice my coincidence symbol shows up. So with one mouse click, I can click, hold down, and drag my mouse pointer out, and then let go with my left mouse click, and it terminates that rectangle, but I'm still in the mode of drawing rectangles. I can hit escape 2 or 3 times and that'll turn loose of that command, and then I can go to smart dimension. But in this case, what I want to do is I just want to come up and I want to select a smart dimension. You know, as we discussed earlier, it's pretty intuitive on the dimension commands, and as I move my mouse pointer over here, notice that it has the dimension symbol showing up on it. So it tells me that I'm no longer drawing rectangles and I want to dimension something. I'm not exactly sure what size that it was on the height, so I have to come back and take a look. This thing is actually 2.5 tall by 3.5 long. So one mouse click, I let go of it, I pull my mouse pointer out to somewhere in the modeling space, and a second mouse click, and then it allows me to put in the dimension that I want. And I think it was 2.5, and then enter one time. So as I'm still in the command, notice that these two lines, they turn black. So what that's telling us is that we're beginning to develop the constraints on where this thing, this shape is actually being defined by these constraints. So we know that the center of our rectangle is on the point of origin, and this line would be 1 1/4 from the point of origin, and this line is also 1 1/4 from the point of origin. Notice the endpoints of these two lines are still blue, so that tells us that they're not defined quite yet. So the next dimension that I'm going to need is this bottom dimension. So I would select the bottom line, one mouse click, pull my mouse pointer out, a second mouse click, and this allows me to put the dimension in there as well. So 3.5 was that dimension. Notice my sketch turned completely black. I can click out into blank space, and I look, my dimensions are black, my sketch is completely black. So I think that I'm fully defined, but the only way that you can truly tell that is we want to look down here in this bottom right hand section where it says that this sketch is fully defined. I feel pretty confident that we're defined the way we want to be, so I'm going to exit our sketch, and it automatically puts us back into extruding material out of the tool that we created, the sketch pattern that we created. Here are some of our options. One thing that I like to do is I like to keep my parts fairly symmetric in here. So what I want to do is I actually want to drop this chevron down where it says blind. So blind would be one direction, so I could either make it go facing me or away from me, just depends on what I wanted to do. But in this case, I want to take another option, and I actually want to use the mid-plane command. So that's going to allow for material to be extruded in 2 directions. I have to go back and look because I can't really remember how wide this particular part is, and it's actually going to be 2 inches wide. So mid-plane, and then the value that we want right here is going to be 2. So we hit enter. It gives us this preview as it's kind of yellow. It shows everything that we're looking for. I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm then going to accept this command, and we now have a solid. Now if you notice, after we have this solid, when we first started this, we only had these 2 features that were had color to them. So these were the 2 features that we had available to us with the sketch that we were going to create. Now we can do multiple other features. We can manipulate this model any way that we want to. In this case, we want to go back and look at our drawing again. We could either cut the chamfer, cut this off, or we can draw this circle in here and cut it out, because it's going to go all the way through. If we look at this view, it shows that there's a hole that goes all the way through. These dashed lines are going to be our hidden lines. This is the way this part's going to look if you were to rotate it around. So let's go back to our part. I think I want to cut the hole next. So the hole is going to be 1.25 inches up, 1.5 from the left hand side, and it's also going to be a diameter of 1 inch that goes all the way through the part. So with that being said, we could use a hole wizard, but that's going to come at a later time. So we're going to select extruded cut. Now, if you look over here to the left, it usually gives you a yellow hint window. So it's going to select a plane or a planar face. Remember, we've got to have three data points to create a plane. With that being said, we can actually pick this face to draw on, or we could expand this tree out and we could pick our plane that we have here. I'm just going to go ahead and pick this face, and notice how it kicks around normal to us. So when we first start doing this, I really like drawing and creating sketches as I'm looking normal to it, because it just reduces that level of confusion that's out there. So after we selected the feature that we wanted, it automatically put us in the sketch mode, and in this case we want a circular feature. So I can drop this chevron down and we can look at a circle by center, or we can look at a perimeter circle. Circle by center is by far going to be the easiest thing that we want, so I select circle by center. So I come to our point of origin. I don't want it on our point of origin because we have dimensions on here. If I pull it out here and I place it in this location, it may cause me problems because it's going to relate it with a horizontal relation to that point of origin. So I'm just going to place it a little bit askew. One mouse click, move my mouse out just a little bit, and a second mouse click, and that creates that circle. So now what we want is to come up and we'll select a smart dimension. So we know that the diameter of the circle is going to be 1 inch. So one mouse click, move your pointer out a little bit, a second mouse click, and this allows us to put in what size the circle is. So it was 1. So I'll select 1, enter, and notice it changes the size of our circle in relation to what we actually drew. Don't be concerned about drawing it to size. We're going to force it into a little bit of submission. So now I know that looking at our drawing is going to be 1.25 up. So if we look at our orthographic view, 1.25 up, and it's going to be 1.5 over from the left. So smart dimension, I'll pick this bottom edge, and I'll come up and I'll just grab the outer portion of our circle, because it's all automatically going to default to the center of our circle. So that was one mouse click at the edge, one mouse click on the edge of the circle, come out, pull it out a little bit to where you can see what's going on, and a third mouse click, and that allows us to put in where we want this circle located from the bottom. So that was 1.25. Alright, it moved it up. So we still are under defined. We have to locate the part from the left hand side. So I come select the left edge, I select the circle, pull the mouse pointer up to where I can place my dimension, and that was going to be 1.5. Now notice the color of our circle actually changed, And what that's telling us is that we've got everything in here needed to fully define that particular sketch. I also can look down here to the bottom right section where it says fully defined, and I'm now confident that we're good to go with this particular sketch. So when we exit the sketch, it automatically is going to put us into, it's going to put us back into cutting through the part. Mine says blind right here, but as I'm looking at this thing normal to here, I can't tell what direction that we're actually being cut, we're going to cut through. So what I can do is I can take my middle scroll wheel, press down on the middle scroll wheel, not roll it, press down and rotate it around to where I can see what's going on. And then I never want to think about this again. So if I go blind at 2 inches, it will cut through the part. But what I want to do is, if I ever change the part dimension to 2.5, this cut would stay 2 and it wouldn't cut all the way through. So I want to give it a little bit of ability to think, or parametric modeling. So what I want to do here is I want to select through all. This is an option that no matter what I do, it's always going to go through that particular part. So when I select it, I feel confident about what's going to happen here. I can take this little green check and select OK, and we now have a hole in our part. So I can rotate it around by holding the middle mouse scroll wheel down, pressed it. So I roll it around and look, but I'm unsure of what orientation that I put this thing because I've moved it really quick. I want to get it back into isometric view that we had before. And there's a really quick shortcut, or you can come up here to this view orientation in the top. You can drop that chevron down and it allows you to pick several of these. Now if I hover over this isometric view, it tells me that my shortcut is Control 7. So go ahead and select a Control 7 or select the icon, and you should put your model back in the isometric view. Now as we look at our drawing here, there's a piece that we still need to take care of right here on this right hand side. So we've got to remove some material. So that material that we want to remove is right here. We can do that with a couple of commands, and right now I want to do it with the sketch again since we're still working with sketches and the models. So the way that we can do that is we want to do an extruded cut. Now we always look to our left. It's going to give us some direction on what we need to do. So I want to select a plane or a planar face, and I want to pick this face here, our very front face. It kicks around normal to us again, and this is one good thing about this particular product is we can actually do it with one line. So when I want to select the line command, I can drop the chevron down and it gives us a couple options. I don't really want a center line because that's used for reference, and I don't want a midpoint line because I'd have to figure out where the midpoint is on this. So I just want to select a regular line. I move over here and I'm going to tickle this edge. I'm not going to click on anything, but I just kind of drive around it. And notice I've got this midpoint of this top edge right here. I don't want to place it here because I want to force it with dimensions, but I do want it on this edge. So I want to do one mouse click here, and I can move my line down, but I also don't want to place it down here on this midpoint because I know that it has a dimension. Even though right now it may be at the midpoint, I really don't want to place it there. I want to do it with dimensions and have a little more control over it. So now that I've put my line here, I'm still in the line command because I didn't try to terminate it or anything, but I know that I'm going to go to dimensions. So I come up here to the top left and I say smart. I select smart dimension, and now I move my mouse pointer over. Notice it's showing the mouse has the command of dimensioning. I'm going to come to this bottom edge again, one mouse click. I want to come up to this end point right here of that particular line that we just drew, and I want to select the end point. A second mouse click, and I'm going to pull it out into the modeling space where I can kind of see what's going on. I place it down and I know that it is 1.25. I hit enter one time. I'm still in the dimensioning command because if you look at my mouse, it's showing that I still have that selected. Now, angular dimensions are a little bit different than, just a standard dimension of a line or dimension between two lines. So this is going to take a little bit of forethought on here. So what I want to do is I want to pick this vertical line, one mouse click. And I'm going to pick the line that we drew, a second mouse click. Now, we have these quadrants that are where we pull our dimension and where we place it is really going to matter. If you notice, I pull it up into this area and it shows me that right now the line that I drew is about 48 degrees, 47, 48 degrees. If I pull to this quadrant, it's trying to tell me I'm 227 degrees. If I pull down here, it's 132. If I pull down here, so your opposite angles should line up. So what I want to do is I want to place my dimension here, and I want to make it 45 degrees or 45. It'll automatically make it 45 degrees, so I don't have to put in the degree symbol. So we're at 45 degrees. We're at 1.25 inches up. Our line is fully defined, so we're now able to move on with confidence because I look down here to the bottom right, we're fully defined. I want to exit the sketch. Alright, so notice I have an arrow here and an arrow here, but I can't really see what's going on. So I'm going to take my middle scroll wheel and roll it around to where I can see what's happening. Now, this little arrow here tells me that I'm going to remove this yellowish area of material and leave this down here. And that's really what I want, so I'm not going to flip anything. I could flip the side to cut over here on this left hand side, but that's not what I want to do. So if I flip it, it's going to remove the other material. So you can toggle that back and forth, but I want to leave my arrow facing up. There's another thing that I'd like to do because I don't want to have to think about it again. So instead of just a blind cut with a depth on it, I want to change that to through all. So that's going to remove it, and no matter if I decide to change our model to 4 inches or 10 inches or whatever else, it's always going to cut that for me. So I'm happy with what I have here, so I hit this green check and accept our command, and it looks as if our model is actually complete. So what I want to do is I want to do I want a command of Control 7. So we have now put it back in isometric. I'll come back and look at the drawing that we started with, and it looks as if we are in good shape. So the next thing to do is save this as your assignment number, and we'll submit this in Blackboard. Thank you very much, and we will talk to you soon.